Hey everyone, my name's Michael. I'm the Customer Success Lead at Xano, and this tutorial is going to go over the starter template. And it's really just to help show you some basic backend and app concepts and also get you familiar with Xano so you can start building. If you're coming to us from Product Hunt, I just want to say welcome. Thank you so much for the support. We're really excited to have you guys. So let's get started. First, I'm going to jump to the database. We'll talk about how that's set up, and then we'll jump to the API where we've set up a bunch of different API endpoints to show you how the no-code API builder works a little bit, how you can work with data, and just get used to Xano. So first of all, over here in the database, you can see that we have two tables right now. We're going to keep it pretty basic for now. We have a user table and content. We can show the relationships between the two tables. It looks like a user is related to the content table, so maybe the user creates some content. Let's actually click into these. First, I can click into the user table. We can see we've populated this with some dummy data. We've got a few names here, email, magic link, which is a way to do authentication or login without a password. We'll talk about that later. And also roles. So maybe we have different roles in our application. Looks like there's admin and maybe a common type of user. We'll go back. Let's jump into the content table. You can see we have a title for the content, a description, that relationship or table reference rather to the user, so we know who created it, and then an image for each piece of content. So that's it for the database. Pretty basic, but let's jump to the API. We go to the API. We'll see that we have this API group called starter template. So you can group different API endpoints into groups to organize them. If you have different use cases for endpoints, say you have endpoints that are just for admin, and maybe you have endpoints that are for your users, or you want to do some testing, etc. That's what API groups can be used for. So I'm going to click into this, and in here you'll see all the endpoints that were created for the starter template. And we'll go through each one so you can understand some important concepts. Everything in here is fully customizable, so if you want to make changes to it, add stuff, go right ahead. I want to point out we give you your API base URL right here. You can one-click copy that to your clipboard. And also we auto-document everything for you in Swagger, so that's right there with the click of the button. So the first thing I want to go over will be basic auth. And that's these three endpoints right there. Basic auth is just normal sign up, login, and then this auth me, which gets the user record based on an authentication token. So whenever you sign up or log into an application, Xano will give you a JWE token, which is an industry standard for authentication token. All you need to know is it is an encrypted token that tells your application the user is who they say they are. So for example, if we look at the sign up endpoint, we see we input a name, email, and password. Looks like we check to make sure the user doesn't already exist. We add the user, and then we create that authentication token. So for example, if I wanted to go ahead and sign myself up, I'll just say something like Michael as the name, and I'll do a fake email address, michael@email.com. And the password might be test1234. So when I go ahead and run this, we'll see we get this big encrypted token in there, and this tells the application that I am Michael. So we can actually copy this authentication token, and whenever we see endpoints that require authentication, you'll see it with this little lock icon actually locked, so this auth me. And you can also see it right here, authentication required. You can click that to either enable that or disable that. But when we go to run this endpoint now, let me go ahead and just clear this out. You'll see that this endpoint requires this header for this authentication token to actually run it. So I can't actually hit run here. What we'll have to do is I can either paste in that auth token I just got and hit run, and then we'll get my user record back. Or Xano lets us easily select the auth token of any one of our users to quickly test our endpoints here in Xano. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to skip the login endpoint. It's very similar to sign up, except you're just logging in. So an existing user logs in, a brand new user signs up. Pretty straightforward. Next, I'm going to talk about Magic Link. Magic Link right here is this auth group, and this allows your users to log in without a password. So what happens first is an existing user would go ahead and input their email address on the front page of your application. This generate magic link function would run, which you can find in library under custom functions. There's a whole bunch of logic in there, which is concealed in one single function. So if we go ahead and look at our custom functions and we look at generate magic link, you can see all the different logic that is happening here, which generates this magic link. We'll go ahead, I'll go back to that API endpoint real quick. We just do a precondition to make sure that magic link is actually being produced. And then we use a send grid to actually send that email to the user. So what happens is the user puts in their email address, this magic link gets produced, and then it gets put in an email. That email shows up to your inbox, and you're able to click that and actually log in. When you log in, you'll hit the second magic link endpoint. That magic link will have a special magic token, which will basically exchange it for a valid authentication token like we saw in the basic auth endpoints, and log in your user. Now there's a full tutorial on magic link if you go to the marketplace, and if you go into authentication, and you go to magic link with SendGrid. Definitely recommend checking out the tutorial, and you can also explore the live demo right here to actually test it out with a mock front end. There are a number of things you'll have to actually configure to use this. If you go ahead and select manage, there'll be some environment variables. There's full instructions on how to configure all that. You'll have to set up with an account with SendGrid, get some information from there, and also do a couple things in Xano. But pretty straightforward, just follow those instructions. Once again, Magic Link is a way to enable your users to log in without a password. Okay, next I'm going to do add-ons. So add-ons are a very unique and powerful feature in Xano. They give you the same flexibility of something called GraphQL in the sense that it allows you to extend the data of a single API call from different database tables. So for example here, if we actually go and click on this API endpoint here, what we're doing is querying all the records. You can see this in the function stack here. So if we normally query all the records from content, all we'll see is the content. But what we've done here is we've created this add-on to actually show us what user created that piece of content. So I'm going to just cancel out that add-on real quick and show you how this endpoint works without the add-on. So if I run this, we'll see each piece of content here. But notice we just get this user ID, number 3, number 1, and number 2, right? We don't actually see what the user's name was. We can use add-ons. If we go into this function, go to the output tab and hit create new add-on. So right here, I have this creator add-on. I'll go ahead and create this again just to show you. I can do create new add-on. And we go through this little wizard for the add-on. Step 1 will be choose what database table you want to add to the response. So I want to be able to decorate this content data with the user that created the content. So I can go ahead and select user. How do I want the data returned? In this case, there's just going to be one creator per piece of content. So I might just do a single item here. And then step 3 is how do we want to connect the database table? So I'll say on the user.id, because remember, in the content table, we have that table reference to the user ID. I'll go ahead and select it there. I'll hit next. Choose name. I'll actually call this creator once again. It'll be a duplicate, but that's okay just for the purpose of this. And we can see that the user ID will be mapped to each other. And we can even customize the response. So here, maybe all that's important to me. I don't want to see this magic link, this role, this email. I just maybe want to see the name and the ID of the creator. I can hit done, and now we'll see that data is going to be extended. So when I go ahead and hit run now, not only do we see each piece of content, but now we have this little creator add-on, and I can see that, hey, user ID 2 is actually Steve, so he created this nutrition content. We can scroll down to beats and tempo. We can see that was created by James, and build a brand created by Bob, etc. So that's add-ons. There's a really great tutorial on it. If you go ahead and go back into that wizard, you can find it here. You can also find it in the library under add-ons. So very unique and powerful feature. There's a lot there you can do with that. but I just wanted to show you a basic example of that. So next, let's go ahead and scroll down and let's go over conditionals. So conditionals are if, then, else statements. And you might find yourself using that a lot based on whatever complexities you may need to use in your application. This example is just going to do a temperature conversion. So we're going to input a degrees, and then if we want to convert from either Celsius or Fahrenheit, and then we're going to apply conditional logic. So the conditional statement will say, if the input, which is called convert from, is equal to Fahrenheit, then we'll do the conversion formula to do Fahrenheit to Celsius. As you can see here, I've added these different filters. You can hit add filter on any input line you might see in Xano. So we're doing the Fahrenheit to Celsius formula here, subtract 32 multiplied by 5/9. I'm doing a round, and then I'm just adding a text after that to say this is now Celsius. And then similarly in the else, so that means if the input is not Fahrenheit, so it would be Celsius, we would assume, we're doing the opposite formula and then adding on or concatenating Fahrenheit as text. And then in conditionals, it's very important if you have then and else and you want to return those results to make sure the return variables are named the same thing. Because otherwise, if you try to return, say this said Celsius up here and I had Celsius in my response, but we ran the else, then we wouldn't find those results in the response. So make sure that the return variable is named the same thing in the then and else if you want to return both things in your response. So let's go ahead and run this as an example. Let's go ahead and reset this. Let's say 72 degrees, and I'll do Fahrenheit right here. So if we go ahead and run that, we'll see that that is approximately 22 degrees Celsius. Let's go ahead and do Celsius now. Let's go ahead. I'll say something like 19. And in here, we'll run this for Celsius. We can see that's about 66 degrees Fahrenheit. So pretty straightforward there. As you can see, conditional logic, if, then, else statements. And you can stack different functions in here to do different logic depending on your needs. So let's go back and let's keep moving down here. Loop in format date. So loops are a very important concept in backend development. So anytime you're working with a list of data, otherwise known as an array, and you want to do some kind of transformation or manipulation to that list or array, you'll need to iterate over that list in order to manipulate it. So in this API endpoint, what we're going to do is we're going to update a list from that content table to manipulate the timestamp so it is human readable format. So first of all, let me go ahead and I'm just going to hide this loop at first and just show you the content as is. So the content as is, you'll see this created at is this timestamp. It's this large number. So Xano stores timestamps as Unix timestamps in milliseconds. And a Unix timestamp is just the amount of time in milliseconds since January 1st, 1970, UTC. So in order to get all these created at timestamps in a human readable format, we can apply a filter to that to format the timestamp. But since we want to do it to a list of all three of these items at the same time, we'll actually have to loop through this list. So what we have here is this for each loop. So what we're saying is the list is this content variable, and we're going to call the iterated list now item. We can name this whatever we want, but this will be the new variable whenever referencing that list within the nested loop here. So in the nested loop, we're going to do an update variable. We're doing the variable item dot created at. So we're getting for each item in the content, we're updating the created at field by itself, and then we're formatting the timestamp. So this format timestamp allows us to use these special characters, and this is linked up in our documentation. You can see all the special characters to manipulate timestamps to human readable format. however you please. So R is a nice little shortcut, and the time zone will be just UTC here. So when we go ahead and run this, you can see that we'll pull back all that content, but now our created at will be a human readable format. So it is much easier on the eyes. So that's anytime you want to manipulate a list of items, add a list of items to the database. That's what you would use loops for. So let's go back and let's keep moving on down. The next set is this password reset API group here. So this password reset actually leverages the same magic link business logic, if you will. So the idea is a user will say forget password, and then they'll be taken to a page where they'll need to input their email address. That'll use the same magic link logic and SendGrid to actually send an email to that user. Okay. If the user has access to that email address, they'll get a link that will say, okay, click here to log in and reset password. That'll essentially hit the same endpoint from magic login right here, where it takes that magic token generated in that magic link and exchanges it for a real auth token and logs in the user. This allows the user to hit an authenticated endpoint, which in this case will be the update password endpoint. This update password endpoint is pretty straightforward. Imagine on your front end, now you're taken to a page where you input your password and then a second input just to make sure that it matches. We're running a precondition there to make sure that. We're getting the record from the user, enforcing that the user is who they say they are with the authenticated ID. And then we're updating the password from that user, and they have reset their password. Once again, these endpoints will take in some environment variables. And there's a video on password reset as well that you can reference to understand. Environment variables, you can see all the ones that are required for this template here. The SendGrid from email and SendGrid API key, that'll be used for both magic link and password reset. Magic JWT secret, both password reset and magic link. Magic link SendGrid template for magic link. Magic link expiration time, both password reset and magic link. And then lastly, SendGrid password reset template. So once again, there's tutorials that go through all of that. But just note those will need to be configured to actually use these endpoints. So definitely recommend watching those tutorials on each magic link and password reset. So moving on down, just a couple left. First is role-based access control. So many times in your application, you'll have users with different roles and access, and you want to be able to enforce that they are only able to do the functionality that maybe their role allows them to do. So this API endpoint, for example, is one that only admins can run, and it's pulling all the user records. So in this example, we're saying that only the admin can go and see the information of every single user, right? Maybe normally only you can see the information of yourself. We also have an add-on in here. Remember earlier we did one from content to show the user that created it. This one is so we can see all the content that a user has created. Let's go ahead and click in this endpoint real quick. A few things going on. First, authentication is required. Once we do that, we're just going to get the record from the user. We're able to find the user based on the ID field. We can select any field we want whenever we're looking up, editing records, things like that. The field value, we can find that from the authentication token. So that ID is stored in the authentication token. Then we're doing a precondition, which enforces something is true. We're just saying that now that we've taken the user record with user check, we're saying that variable .role must be equal to admin to continue. If not, we'll get this access denied error. If we pass that, we'll be able to query all records from the user. Once again, we have this add-on here. This is showing a list of content each user has created. So let's go ahead and actually run this. So first, let's go ahead and get an admin, which is, I believe, it is Bob, user number 1 here. So if we run this, I believe Bob is the admin, so we'll be able to see we have all our users in here, and each user has the content of user add-on. So we can see the content that they have created. So we've extended this data with an add-on. And Michael, who we just created, remember, there's no content there yet. So we can see all the information there. Let's go ahead and run this for a different user. Everyone else is common, so let's go ahead and pick James now. If we try and run this, well, we get this error and it says you do not have admin access. So right away, you can see how easy it is to put up different security barriers to enforce things are true before you run the rest of your logic. So that's role-based access control. Last but not least down here is upload content. This one is uploading an image. So we're going to add a new record to content in order to actually upload an image here. A couple of things to point out. First, to upload a file, a image, attachment, a video, you need to use this file resource input. So oftentimes we'll see people go into storage, and there's different options here: image data, image metadata, video metadata, attachment metadata. If you're uploading, you always want to use the file resource. File resource is super flexible. It accepts the actual file if you have a file uploader on your front end, a URL. With Xano, you can put that right in the debugger, or a base64 encoded file. So you can upload an image, video, or attachment depending on what you're doing with any of those three options. Once you have the file resource, the first thing you need to do in your function stack is use this create image from file, and you just map up that file resource input here, and this will create the image metadata, which is formatted so it can be stored in the Xano database. And then you can go ahead and add that to your database. Just map that image field with the variable that is outputted from your create image from file function there. And the rest of this here, I'm just mapping the title to this title input, the description, and then we're actually finding the user based on the authenticated user ID. So we don't actually have to put in the user ID. This endpoint requires authentication. So let me go ahead and run this, and I'll create some content for myself. So if I go ahead and just say run and debug, and I'm going to go ahead and switch my token to Michael. And I have this example image URL of a puppy right here, and I'll just paste that into the debugger. And the title here will be, we'll say puppy love, and description, we'll say this. So I'll go ahead and run this. You can see the response back, but let's actually jump to the database and now into our content table, and look how that record was newly created there. There's my auth ID right there, and we have the image of our puppy created there for our content. So that wraps it up for this starter template video. Once again, you can customize, play around with any of these API endpoints. You can see how things are created with this no-code API builder. These are designed to teach you a lot of the basic concepts, not just in backend development, but also application development and Xano in general. And we hope you are successful with these. Once again, in regards to Magic Link and password reset, there's some configuration involved with SendGrid, and also this extension. You can watch the tutorials in the marketplace or on our YouTube channel. That being said, there are many, many tutorials on our YouTube channel to help you along the way. Once again, thank you so much for checking out Xano. We're really excited to have you, and we hope you're successful.